Yeah, so that particular picture was taken around 1991 or 92. I was a senior member of the Army Ranger Wing, the counter-terrorist unit in Ireland, and we were training the new batch of operators coming into the units. So they would pass selection, and then they would go on the what the American military SF would call the qualification course or the operator training course. And it was, as I remember, 4 to 6 months of, intensive shooting, CQB, survival training, medical training, all the stuff they need to serve on a team. So what we did at the end of that, and this wasn't standard, it was kind of different every course depending on the cadre, but what we came up with, we took them out into the field in the Wicklow Mountains, and they would navigate from one point to the other over the course of a week. And as they would come down a valley and find their checkpoint, there would be a military task there for them. So sometimes it would be a tent, and they would go in and there'd be a bunch of casualties, and they'd have to triage the casualties and treat them. And then they would move to another point where they would do CQB hit, shooting test, foreign weapons test. So that's actually why I'm carrying an Uzi, was because one of the tests was a foreign weapons test where they had a dozen foreign weapons they had to disassemble and assemble. So because of the political situation at the time, the instructors always carried live ammo. So I would have been carrying an MP5 anyway and a pistol. So instead of carrying an extra machine gun, I just took the Uzi and loaded a couple of mags for the Uzi and carried it as my security weapon, and then used it for the foreign weapons stage. At that particular photograph, we had them in an assembly area. They didn't know what was going to happen, and we brought them out one at a time, and we escorted them up to the top of a bridge. It was Blessington Bridge, if people probably know it. And we ran a zip line from one end of the bridge all the way across the lake to an end point on the other side of the lake. And then when we brought them up to the top of the bridge, we took off their blindfold, and they looked down at the end of the zip line, and the unit commander was there holding their Green Beret, which signaled the end of their probation and their training, so they would go to a team. He was holding up their Green Beret, and they had a zip line down and get it. But before they started, they took off their black beret, which is a regular army beret, and they threw it into the lake, and then they zip lined down. Halfway down, we stopped the zip line, and they had to drop down into the lake and then swim over to the other side to get to the commander for him to give them their Green Beret. It's actually a pretty cool way to get your beret. The reason he's wearing a life preserver is because he had all that kit on, and we didn't want him sinking to the bottom of the lake at that point. So that's the backstory for that. Like I said, I'm in the first page of this. I'm going to try to do maybe one of these a week, and I'll do the whole backstory to some of those older posts, because if you're like me, if people write a whole big story on their post, you kind of tune out. So it might be easier just to listen to somebody telling you the backstory, and I'll keep it non-violent. I won't be talking about, war stuff. Austin's laughing at me. All right, thanks, bye.